Hello and welcome to George's World of Science, and on tonight's show we'll be looking at the history of inheritance and its implications on genetic diseases. For thousands of years, farmers have been trying to selectively breed their crops and animals to try and maximise their yields. However, it was not understood why the offspring showed similar or even different traits until a European monk named Gregor Mendel in 1866 discovered how with his love of growing peas. Gregor Mendel was a pea breeder, and he decided to cross a green pea with a yellow pea. Now naturally you would expect the offspring to be half yellow and half green, but what Gregor Mendel found was that all the offspring produced a yellow pea pod, not what you would generally expect. Gregor Mendel then took the yellow pea pods and self-pollinated them. He then found that for every 1 in 4 pea pods produced, one was green. So how can a green pea pod be produced from a completely yellow pea pod? We call the variance in a characteristic an allele. So in the case of our pea pods, the variance in colour, i.e. green or yellow, are 2 different alleles. As you can see from the picture, one allele is inherited from the father and the other allele is inherited from the mother. Mendel also suggested that there were certain units that determined the strength of the allele. Scientists now know these units to be genes. Genes are small sections of DNA of which code for a certain protein. And you can think of DNA as the blueprints for the body. So a gene is just a small section of the blueprint that codes for a certain thing. Let's make it simple, for instance, the colour of a pea pod. In biology, we assign the dominant allele a capital letter. Let's use the capital letter A. And a recessive allele is given a lowercase letter. Let's use, for instance, B. All organisms, so animals and plants, get 1 letter from each parent. So the offspring will have 2 alleles in every cell, apart from the sex cells. So for instance, an offspring can inherit 2 dominant alleles, A, 2 recessive alleles, B, or a mixture of the 2. We can predict the likelihood of what characteristics the offspring will inherit by use of a simple table. One parent's alleles are placed along the top. Let's use a 2 dominant alleles for the mother, and the other parents listed at the side. Let's use a mixture of a dominant and a recessive. Now we can fill in the tables by matching up the corresponding letters. Each segment within the table is a possibility of the offspring. So in this instance, we have 50% chance, since it's 2 out of 4, of the offspring having double A, 2 dominant alleles. There is also a 50% chance that the offspring will have a mixture of a dominant A and a recessive B, but there is no chance of a 2 recessive B occurring. As we know that yellow is dominant, we will now assign it the capital letter Y, and green is recessive, so we'll assign it a small g. If we make up the same table we used before, we can show that all the offspring would have been yellow. So all the combinations is a mixture of the yellow and the green alleles, but because yellow is dominant over green, all the pea pods will be yellow in colour. Mendel then self-pollinated one of these yellow pods, so the alleles are replicated. And if we complete the table, we'll find that there is a GG allele which will result in green pea pod. The rest, all containing the dominant Y, will all be yellow. This will explain why there is a green pea pod that occurs for every 1 in 4 pea pods grown. Modern day genetics has shown that not only can normal traits be passed on, such as hair colour or pea pod colour, but also genetic diseases can be passed on. This is the same principles of Mendel's theory. Genetic diseases such as Huntington's disease and cystic fibrosis are both genetic diseases with no cures. Huntington's disease affects the brain cells in the lower part of the brain. Currently there is no cure and it's 100% fatal. Huntington's disease is a dominant allele, but because it affects its sufferer in later life, they would have most probably have already had their children. There is a 50% chance that Huntington's disease will be passed on to their children. But would you, as the child, be willing to have a genetic test to show whether you had Huntington's or not? Cystic fibrosis leads to the build-up of mucus in the lungs of the digestive system. Cystic fibrosis is a recessive allele, so you could be a carrier of the disease without suffering from any symptoms. If 2 carriers had a baby, then that baby has a 25% chance that it will suffer from cystic fibrosis. Would it be ethical to test the embryo to see if it has cystic fibrosis in a stage where you could terminate the pregnancy? So thanks to Mendel devoting all his time to growing peas, we now understand the fundamentals behind inheritance of both traits that we want and do not want to inherit.